It's Judicial Watch doing the basic heavy lifting on the virus of the millennium. Really, isn't it? In terms of its economic impact on the world. In a related story, there was a big fight this week in the Senate between Dr. Rand Paul, Senator Rand Paul, who's also a medical doctor, and Dr. Fauci about Fauci's support or the government's support. Fauci is a key official in this area about what is known as gain of function research. Now, gain of function research, as best as I'm able to describe it, is the manipulation of viruses by scientists in order to make them more communicable in terms of being able to better infect human populations. And the alleged goal of this is to say, well, if this virus is out in the wild, what happens if it mutates? What would happen if it mutates and is able to jump into the human population? What would be the effects? So what they're trying to do is to study the effects in order to be prepared if it jumps into the human population. Now, the problem with that is this process can potentially, in theory, as you might guess, result in the viruses getting out anyway before we know what to do about them. So what we're doing is we're actually creating and making the viruses more likely to infect and trouble human beings without being adequately prepared. Now, Dr. Fauci was pushed on this issue because it's been well reported that federal funding has gone to this type of research, both here in the United States and abroad, specifically the Wuhan Institute of Virology, where the virus first arose. And so the question is, was the virus part of this gain of function research? And was that the reason it got out of the lab? Now, the working theory is it was accidental. More suspicious types think that it wasn't, but the question is it a virus essentially of human origin or engineering? And so it's an open question. Now, is it conclusive that that's the issue, or that the virus originated out of the Wuhan Institute of Virology or any other lab? No. I mean, there's still a possibility it was a naturally evolved virus that went from a bat to intermediate species, let's say a rat, and then got into the human population. Or there's slightly less chance that it just went from the bat right to the human population. But there's also strong evidence that it, I've read enough about it to be confident that there's strong evidence, but I'm not confident enough and scientifically to describe it in a way that would be responsible. But there's strong evidence that the virus was engineered. And one of those pieces of strong evidence in terms of government information is a State Department finding, intelligence information that came out that people who worked at the lab were sickened with COVID-like symptoms in fall of 2019, shortly before the virus erupted around the world. So all of that's out there. And for a long time, we weren't allowed to even raise the issue because of the pro-China lobby, both here in Washington, D.C., in the United States, in the media, and internationally, because as you know, China has outsized influence with the World Health Organization, as President Trump rightly pointed out. So Judicial Watch, of course, hasn't been cowed by what we're allowed to ask versus what we're not allowed to ask. I mean, this is the totalitarian instinct that's so prevalent these days, that we're not even allowed to ask questions. We're not even allowed to think, to say, why, how did this happen? And why is it we should accept your reassurances from a totalitarian regime that it didn't happen? Some assurances were presented by people who were actually potentially involved in this type of gain of function research and may have been more directly involved in the funding of it, specifically in Wuhan. Now, you would think this would be a big matter of public investigation. It isn't. As best as I can tell, Judicial Watch is the only one who was sued for information about U.S. funding of this gain of function research, and specifically monies that went to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Your money. And it's not only a third party that was funding this with your tax dollars, but it looks like the Chinese were working with U.S. scientists here, including Dr. Barrick, as Senator Rand Paul pointed out, in North Carolina. And Dr. Fauci said, well, he's not doing gain of function research, and if he is, it's under the proper rules. How does that work? Is he or not? Is he or not? And why are they hiding the documents? We asked for these documents over a year ago. Give us documents about this gain of function research, and they refused to give it to us. So we're in federal court about it. And I blame Dr. Fauci for the delay. Why is it I blame Dr. Fauci for the delay? Because in another case where we're asking for documents about from Fauci and his top deputy about their communications with WHO concerning COVID in China. And the government's been giving us documents. I've talked about some of what those documents have shown, including this deference to China and allowing China to dictate terms of what U.S. government officials were allowed to say about the investigations into Wuhan. And in that case, one of the reasons we've been slow rolled, the government admits to us, is that Dr. Fauci has to review the material. Since when does that take place? I mean, I've been doing this work at Judicial Watch 23 years. 23 years. And this is the first time that I can recall where the senior government official, the government comes out and admits the head of the agency is reviewing these documents, and this is why it's going to take forever and a day for you to get them. Is that going on in this other case about Wuhan? Why are they hiding these records from us? How many records could there be about this funding? Can't be a lot. Maybe there are, or maybe there aren't, but they don't want what's out there to come out. So once again, it's Judicial Watch doing the basic heavy lifting on the virus of the millennium. Really, isn't it? In terms of its economic impact on the world. Much of which didn't have to be as much as it was, because as I said earlier, much of the mitigation efforts that were so damaging to the economy, to livelihoods, to our health, both physical and mental, to children, were unneeded, and had little to do with the spread of the virus in terms of either speeding it along or stopping it. And it's Judicial Watch who's doing the basic litigation on, well, tell us what's going on with China and COVID. Tell us what was going on with the money. Give us your emails. Congress isn't doing it. And now it used to be we weren't even allowed to ask these questions, as I suggested. Now the media is beginning to ask the questions because everyone, this is what's so really outrageous about this, is that pretty much every serious scientist, and I say this knowing that there were a few who, in good faith thought this, it could have been released, but it could have been engineered, but the Lord works in mysterious ways, and viruses like this, even though it looks like, how is it possible this came out at the time? Well, nature. So there are scientists who don't think it was engineered. That's true. But many did, and many were concerned enough to say, why aren't we even asking the question? And we weren't allowed to ask the question, specifically because Donald Trump was asking the question. And we're all supposed to hate Donald Trump, the media tells us. And so Donald Trump, because he asked the question, no one else was allowed to ask the question. That's the totalitarian impulse again at work. So who do you trust to figure this out? You can trust Judicial Watch.
Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to catch all the latest news from Judicial Watch.